Hello and welcome back to my channel. On this video, I'm going to be sharing all of the books that I read in the month of October. And I want to acknowledge this is the lowest amount of books I've read. I hit my 23 for 2023, but October was a very busy month. I launched a couple projects at work. I had a couple family visits that were happening in October. And I'm also in the process of writing a book manuscript that is due in a couple of weeks. So October was just extra in a lot of ways, and I'm happy with the 23 books I was able to read, and I'm excited to dive in and share them with you. The first book that I read in the month is one called Gonzo Capitalism by Chris Guillebeau, and the subtitle is How to Make Money in an Economy That Hates You. And I found this book, it read very quickly. I listened to it on audio. I think it was just a couple of hours long. And I was just really interested in kind of following Chris Guillebeau's latest project. I've read many of his other books. I followed his blog for a long time. And it's just kind of interesting to see where he's taking his work recently. So I enjoyed listening to that. Then I picked up a very atmospheric and seasonal book called Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young. This is a book that I feel like a ton of people have been talking about, and I didn't know much about it going in. It is very atmospheric. I feel like it has kind of some like witchy vibes. It has magic vibes. It has kind of the story of this couple where the boy is kind of accused of something and he ends up running away, and then he comes back and they have to kind of just like wrestle with the past, like the shared past and history that they have together. I really liked this book. I felt like it was perfect for the fall. So if you're looking for a fall read, that would be a great one to add to your list. I also picked up number 5 in the Edens series by Devney Perry called Crimson River. And this book I really enjoyed because it took me back to the very first book in the series, which was kind of a mix between a romance and a thriller because there was a murder mystery. And there was also a murder mystery in this book. And it was also kind of a mix of a romance and a thriller because there's an opening scene where the sibling that is the female main character, who's the romance interest, she is assaulted. And so there's a person who comes in from out of town and he's trying to find this person who assaulted her, and they end up having a romance together. And I just really appreciated having that kind of mix of thriller and romance. I really like that. Okay, I also got through several of the Kay Scarpetta books by Patricia Cornwell. This is a series that I've been trying to read the entire series this year, and there's, I think, like 27, 28 books in this series. So I got through number 14, which is called Predator. And then I also was able to read the 15th book in the series, which is called Book of the Dead. And I read those basically back to back. And then later on in the month, I was able to read let's see, the 16th book in the series, which is called Scarpetta. And then later on in the month read The Scarpetta Factor, which is number 17 in the series. So I got through 4 books in that series over this past month. And I am enjoying the series. I feel like it is definitely taking some twists and turns with character development. One that I was not like, I guess I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. And it's impacting like a multiple book plot arc, and so I can't say much about these books at this point because I'm so far into the series that I feel like it just gives away major things. But if you are interested in a series about a coroner medical examiner and how she's solving crimes and all the people around her, you should definitely consider picking this one up. Okay, then I read one of my Alphabet Challenge books, which was The Marlowe Murder Club by Robert Thorogood, and this is the first book in the Marlowe Murder Club series. I had been seeing this book around for a while, and it's so charming. It's basically about this older woman who's a crossword puzzle maker. She makes crossword puzzles, and she's kind of retired, and she stumbles across a crime, and it's very much like an amateur detective kind of book. I would definitely pick up another one in this series. I considered it to be kind of like a cozy mystery, and it definitely had those fall vibes as well. Okay, after that, I picked up a book called After That Night, which is the 11th book in the Will Trent series by Karen Slaughter. And this is a series that I have read for a really long time. It starts out as what is called the Grant County series, and then there's a Will Trent series, and then the series merged together. And so I would say there's easily 25 books, between the two. And I have read the series like from the very beginning. I really enjoyed it. So this is the most recent addition to this particular series. And it actually goes back in time, because one of the things that we know from like very early in the series is the female main character was sexually assaulted at her work, but we don't know all of the background of that, and that is what is covered in this particular book. So definitely trigger warning for sexual assault, because that is a primary like plot point of what's going on in this book. But it gives you kind of this really more history of this female main character, who by this point in the series you're super invested in, and so it's really interesting to kind of hear that backstory. Okay, my next alphabet challenge book that I picked up is called Magic Hour by Kristen Hanna. This is a book about a girl who basically is feral, and she comes out of the woods, and she's a young girl, and there's a psychologist who is kind of trying to work with her and help her to learn how to like speak and communicate and engage with other humans, because she had not done that very much growing up. And so the kind of like child psychology part of this book was fascinating to me. I really enjoyed that part, and I'm just really enjoying Kristen Hanna, so I will definitely be picking up more from her backlist. I also picked up a book called Little Comfort. This is by an author I had not read before, Edwin Hill, and this is the first book in the Hester Thursby mystery series. And part of why I picked this up is because the female main character, also an amateur detective, she finds missing things, is a librarian, and it just had this like vibe that I was like, I really think I'm going to enjoy this book. I had originally checked these out from the library, and I was having a hard time, you know, getting to them before I had to turn them back in. So I was able to find this on audio, and I would definitely read more in this series. I really enjoyed it. It actually was way more complex than I thought it would be in terms of just like, when I first kind of started hearing about the general plot, I was like, okay, you know, I kind of have a sense of what this will be. And it was just way more complex than I thought it would be, and I really enjoyed that. Okay, I also finished The Crown of Gilded Bones by Jennifer Armentrout. This is the third book in the Blood and Ash series. And I feel like this series, it's 5 books total. I will definitely finish it. I'm invested at this point. But where you start in the series is so different than where you are in book 3. Like there are just major plot like twists and like big changes for the characters, and especially the female main character. And I just really have enjoyed it. Like you are just completely sucked in. Like I feel like this book is one of those things that I am paying a lot of attention to it when I'm reading it, because I'm just like really interested in where the plot is going, and you never know where it's going because the author just takes you on all these crazy trails with these characters. So I'm excited to pick up book 4 from that. Okay, I also read in this past month the first book in the Twilight Saga series by Stephanie Meyer, and one of my fall bucket list items was to reread all the Twilight books. I'd only read the first one, so I've not actually read the entire series, and to watch all the movie adaptations, which I have seen in the past. And I will just say, and this is slightly disappointing for me, I like the movies better than I like at least this first book. I'm hoping the other books in the series are better. I remember when I read this first book in grad school, you know, like 10, 15 years ago, that I remember thinking like the writing was just not very good quality. And I thought, oh, you know, maybe that was just me, you know, being kind of, I don't know, like snobbish about this book. But when I read it again, I was like, yeah, it is just kind of has like a quality to it that is hard for me to get kind of deeply engaged in, because I am paying attention to the quality of the writing. But I love the story arc, and I love the movies, and I love kind of where the whole thing goes. And I'm assuming that the movies are following the books. Maybe they don't. I will find out, because eventually I will read the other books as well. I did listen to this on audio, and I also wasn't thrilled with the audio narrator, which is rare for me that I have an audio narrator that I'm just not really connecting with. So I'm going to dive into book 2 soon and see what I can get through and see what I think of it. But yeah, that was a little bit of a hard realization that like I would love to have this series be one that I like reread multiple times. I don't know that that's going to be the case for me. Okay, then I picked up a book called The Godparent Trap by Rachel Van Dyken. And this is a book about a man and a woman who basically get kind of thrown together because they are good friends, and one of them might even be the sibling of this couple that dies, and they have to have the godparents, who are like I think it's like the brother of the husband and like the best friend of the wife, they are godparents to these children, and when the parents die in like an accident, the godparents come in to take care of the children. And I am just kind of a sucker for a story about someone who has to come in and be like a guardian. This is like other books I've read that I've really enjoyed. People who get kind of thrown into this scenario are just typically plots that I like, and I actually really enjoyed this on audio, so would recommend that one. Another Alphabet Challenge book that I picked up is called Meg and Jo. This is the first book in the March Sisters. I think it's just a duology, 2 books by Virginia Cantra. And this is a kind of retelling of Little Women. And I have been on a Little Women kick lately. Like, I love the retellings of Little Women. I love Little Women. I love Jo's Boys. Like, all of those books I just really, really enjoyed by originally Louisa May Alcott. And so when I saw this, I was like, yep, I'm there. Like, I'm ready to pick this up. And it's basically a contemporary retelling of the 2 sisters, Meg and Jo. And of course, the other 2 sisters show up, but they're not the main characters in this particular book. And in this book, Jo is a food blogger in New York and is in love with a chef. And her sister is kind of a mom, like a stay-at-home mom who wants to get back into working again. And I just really enjoyed this book. I don't know what I was expecting. I felt like my expectations were a little bit low because retellings, you never quite know how it's going to go. But I really liked this, and I would definitely pick up the second book in the series. Okay, then I picked up another Alphabet Challenge book called Maggie Moves On by Lucy Score. I have read other books by Lucy Score and just loved them. And I am really excited to dig into her backlist after reading this one and also really enjoying it. So this is kind of one of the things Lucy Score, in my mind at least, is known for is kind of these longer romance novels. Like, they're like 400 to 500 pages. And what I appreciate about that is you get all of these side characters and you get like a community of people that are really interesting to follow. And so in this particular book, the female main character is like a DIY YouTube star. Like, she goes around and DIYs houses. And she has this best friend who's her producer, and they come to this really like ramshackle house. I think it's in Idaho. And the person that she hires to do the landscaping for this house is the male romantic interest in the book. And there's all kinds of layers to her parents, to her childhood, to her previous relationships. And then you get all of these wonderful side characters coming in as well. And I really, really enjoyed this book. So I'm definitely going to dig more into Lucy Score's backlist. I'm excited for that. All right, then I picked up a book called You Again by Kate Goldbeck. This is clearly the month for like retellings, because this book has been kind of marketed as a retelling of When Harry Met Sally, which is a film that, if you haven't seen it, is basically about a couple, a man and a woman, who like run into each other like right after college, and then every few years they kind of run into each other again. And every time they run into each other, they don't really like each other very much, and then they become friends, and then eventually they become a couple. And so this is basically what happens in this book. I will say in the very beginning, I did not find the female character to be very likable, and that was challenging for me. But the further along I got into the book, what I really started to appreciate about it was not necessarily the characters themselves, which is kind of funny because typically I'm a very character-driven reader, and more of like more character-driven sometimes than plot-driven. In this particular book though, the ambiance is really the thing that stuck out to me. It has very contemporary references to like films, podcasts, things like that. And I could just see this book in my mind. Like, it's very cinematic in the way that it's described. And I found myself just thinking about it for like days after I finished it. And I did eventually become very connected to the characters and their story. And I feel like this is a book that I have seen very broad-ranging reviews. Like, some people are like, this was totally not for me, and other people are like, I loved it. And I feel like I'm more on the side of loving it, but in the beginning it was not for me. So I would say that there may be some people who are not pushing through, like to finish it. But it's worth giving it a try because I feel like the way the author is writing, and I think this was her debut novel, I think it's really well done, and I would totally pick up something from this person in the future. All right, then I picked up The Long Game by Elena Armas, and this is the first book in a series. It's called Long Game, that's the series, and it takes place in a small town, and it involves a lot of soccer. This author has written a couple of other romance novels that I've really enjoyed. One is called The Spanish Love Deception, and I'm not gonna be able to remember the second one, but if you look up the one, it's something about the American. Now I have to look it up. All right, hang on. Let me find out what this author has written before. So there's The Spanish Love Deception, The American Roommate Experiment, and then The Long Game. So The Long Game is not connected to the other two. And I really liked the other two. I especially liked the first one. The Spanish Love Deception I really enjoyed. It was definitely kind of like an enemies to lovers, and very strong enemies to lovers book. And I tend to like that trope. In this book, it's a little bit enemies to lovers, but I feel like this book was very different than her earlier books. The earlier books kind of take place in more of an urban environment. This is definitely more of kind of a rural environment, small town, very quirky. I would say if you're kind of like a Gilmore Girls fan, you would probably like what's going on in this book. It involves things like goat yoga. Like there's like scenes of like kind of funny things that are happening throughout. And I enjoyed it overall. I would definitely pick up another book in this particular series and would definitely pick up other books by this author as well. Okay, then I picked up a book called Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is the first book in the Alex Stern series. It is dark academia. It has magical elements. It is very atmospheric for this time of year, which is part of why I wanted to read it in October. And it's kind of a mystery, like a murder mystery. Like there's kind of an element of that going on, but there's also an element I felt of like the main character, Alex, kind of finding herself and trying to figure out who she is. And the general plot is that she gets asked to join Yale, basically, and to kind of be investigating like these secret societies that are happening at Yale. But the book goes so much deeper than that. And I hesitate to go further in my description because I think it could give something away. And I felt like this was one of those books that I didn't always feel like I knew what was going on because it was very complex. And I would be interested to read the second book in this series. I think this would also make a really good book club book. Like you'd want to talk about it with other people. And after I read it, I was like telling my partner that he should read it so that we could talk about it. So I probably need to go online and like read some reviews and see what other people are thinking about this book, but I could definitely recommend it as kind of a fall atmospheric read. Next up, I read The Marriage Act by John Marrs, and this is the most recent speculative fiction book by John Marrs, in which it has like a set of laws that come into place that are basically saying that marriage is beneficial and people are being pressured to be in marriage relationships. And there is a multi-POV structure to the book. This is very common for speculative fiction, that he has multiple points of view in different chapters. What I really appreciate about John Marrs is I never get confused between the characters. They're all very distinct. There's very different plot lines. Even when I'm listening on audio, I can tell what's going on, within each of these plot lines. I would say that some of his other books, The One is a good example, I loved. This one I would say was a solid, contribution to his kind of portfolio of writing. It's not one of my favorites that he's done, but it was really solid and I enjoyed it. Then I picked up a book that was not on my original list. It's called The Vaster Wilds by Lauren Groff. This is a shorter book. Some people have said that this book is kind of like an analogy, like it's meant to be kind of symbolic. The basic plot, and I feel like this is a book that like the plot doesn't even really matter, but the basic plot is that there's this girl who runs away during kind of colonial times, and there's this kind of sickness that's happening, like a plague, and she runs away into the woods and is trying to kind of get away from both kind of the oppression of the house that she's living in and also, this illness that's happening. And this is a book that if you grew up liking like The Hatchet by Gary Paulson, this is the kind of feel you're gonna get with this book, where she's like surviving in the woods. And there were points in this book where I asked myself, like, what is going on here? Like, do I like this book? Do I not like this book? And by the end of it, I was sold. Like, I really thought it was beautifully done. I don't know exactly what it means symbolically. Like, I'd have to give that a little bit more thought because I feel like there's probably layers to this book. It's more literary fiction than anything else that I would have to kind of like ponder, on this book a little bit to be like, what do I really think about this? But I really, really enjoyed it. And I thought the audio was also phenomenal. So I can recommend it on that too. Then I picked up my last Alphabet Challenge book of the month, which was Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And in my mind, Taylor Jenkins Reid can do no wrong. I have read, I think, 3 books of hers by now. And every single one of them were very different, unique. I loved them. So I will totally dive into her backlist. This is basically a book about a set of siblings whose father is like a famous rock star. And what is interesting is there's a character in this book, like a side character in this book, who shows up as a main character in one of her later books. And I did not know she was making those connections between her books. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And also, like, there's basically like the story takes place within a 24-hour period, and all the siblings are at the house, this house together because they're throwing a party, and they all have these like subplots. And then outside of the siblings, there's these other little mini subplots of characters who are at the party. It's just so well done. I would definitely read this book again. I will read her backlist. I will recommend her, as I am doing for you right now. So I would definitely pick that up. And then the last book of the month that I was able to pick up and finish is called Just My Type by Fallon Ballard. This is an author that I've read another book by her called Lease on Love. And Lease on Love was like not a favorite of mine, but I was really drawn into this particular book because of the premise. It's basically about 2 writers who are at the same publication and they're kind of competing for a column, and they are exes. So they dated when they were in high school. They were kind of high school sweethearts. They broke up when they were in college. And the girl is kind of a serial monogamist. Like, she's always with someone, and the guy is not. Like, he's not, he kind of dates around. And so the idea is that he has to become more of like a monogamist, like he has to find a deep relationship with someone and write about it. And then she has to be more on her own. Like, she has to try to be without a relationship and then write about that. And of course, they start to have feelings for each other again. And it was really fun to see how the author of this book brought in the different columns that they're writing about their experiences, in addition to kind of some of the friend group that is tied around these people as well. So I felt like this one was just kind of a fun read to end the month. So those are the 23 books that I was able to read in the month of October, a very good reading month. And stick around, soon you will see my November TBR pile, which is quite large. And I'm looking forward to seeing how much I can get through in this next month. So until my next video, happy reading.